Hi PPC people, in this video I'd like to talk through an important idea that's easy to miss. And it's a key distinction that's easy to overlook in paid search optimization. It's about the difference between the factors that make a user likely to click on an ad, on one hand, and what makes them likely to convert, or more accurately, the probability that we assign to those two different actions. Paid search success is built far more on the factors that make an ad and the whole setup behind the ad likely to lead to conversions. But the difference between these two things, the chances of a click and the chances of a conversion, can get blurred surprisingly often, even by experienced PPCers, and it's an important difference to keep in mind. To illustrate it, first let's look at audiences. So how do you choose which observational audiences to add to your search campaigns? The usual method is just to consider the most relevant industry and the most relevant topics to the product or service you're advertising. And that also seems to be the main method behind Google's own audience recommendations, the audience ideas feature. But there's a lot missing from this approach. First, if we're looking for high quality, i.e. high converting users, are we right to assume that that's what we'll find amongst users that Google has assigned with the relevant interest? Are they more likely to convert than otherwise randomly selected users who have expressed an interest in what we're offering or an intent to buy it through their search? There are a few things that could count against that assumption. If a user has been placed in either an affinity or in-market audience for a given topic, then we have reasons to think that that user has spent some time browsing around that topic. The more any given user is browsing around a particular topic, making Google more likely to assign them that interest category, the more often, clearly, they are visiting relevant sites or taking other relevant actions that send that signal to Google. And the more often they're doing this, the more relevant actions they're taking, the less likely we could assume that any particular instance of visiting a relevant site is to lead to a purchase or a definitive step towards one. To put this another way, let's assume that a user is in the market for a single purchase, which is often what we're hoping. Then the more often that user browses, watches, clicks around that topic, the less strongly we can tie any one of those many actions to a likely purchase. So our prospect of converting them then probably reduces as the strength of the audience signal they're sending to Google increases. Or of course they may have already bought whatever it is that they were in the market for. Doing so wouldn't remove them from the in-market or affinity audience in question, and if they were good candidates in the first place, then again the stronger their signal has had a chance to become through their actions, the more likely they are to have already reached the buying point in their journey. Also, the user who has been browsing around the topic, either long-term for an affinity audience or short-term for in-market, may well be more discerning than the average user who shows the relevant search-defined intent. That too could easily downweight their conversion rate. They're more likely to be that kind of heavy researcher by virtue of their appearance in the audience. Finally, Google's audience allocation is pretty shaky. See for yourself what audiences Google has earmarked you for through this URL. When I look through the topics that Google's picked out for me, I see some that make sense, some that are probably here because of sites I've been looking at that are relevant to clients, but quite a few that I have no interest in at all or no particular interest, and some that are completely bizarre choices. I mean, Fibercraft, I've never even heard of this, but by the look of it, it's not something I put myself in the target market for. So this selection doesn't seem much better than random when it comes to choosing which ads to show to me. As my daughters might say, I do not feel seen by Google's bots. Taken in aggregate across all users, I'm sure there is plenty of signal in the noise, but there's also clearly a lot of room for error in Google's idea of a relevant audience. So these three main points about relevant audiences are not the whole picture, and I'm not arguing that we should avoid them, just that we should be more conscious of what we're expecting them to do for us. Often in practice, The audiences that win on conversion metrics are not the most straightforwardly relevant ones. The in-market travel audience, for example, often heavily outperforms the average in campaigns completely unrelated to travel, thanks presumably to its correlation with disposable income. The point here is that relevant audiences surely consist of users who are more likely to click, but there's much less reason to think that they consist of users who are more likely to convert having clicked. Now, before I move on from audiences, I should also say that winning audiences aren't necessarily the most useful audiences to add in any case. On smart bidding, we don't have the option to upweight them with positive bid adjustments. So it's of more practical value to add underperforming audiences so that we can identify and exclude them. But let's not get sidetracked because this is already a tricky topic. What's at play here is the difference between likely to click and likely to convert having clicked. And it's the last two words there that make this an easy to overlook topic. Let's take another example. Hair curlers. Let's say we have an advertiser looking to sell hair curlers, a product very much predominantly used by women. A common move there may well be to target only women, exclude the male and possibly unknown demographic segments. That would be intuitive, but provided that our keyword targeting is doing its job, it may also be counterproductive. If men are searching with the phrase buy hair curlers, then those men are telling us that they are interested in buying a hair curler. And at that point, the fact that they're men absolutely ceases to be a disqualifying factor. Now, going from scratch, a randomly selected woman may be far more likely to search and to click and to buy a hair curler than a randomly selected man. But once you switch to comparing men and women within the set of users who have clicked, which is the only place where conversion rate lives, then the picture looks very different, with the less common group often winning on conversion rate, as it did in this exact scenario when I came across it myself, by quite a long way. Finally, remember that there can also be differences in performance levels at the next stage along the whole profit calculation. Conversions themselves can be more or less valuable depending on which segment they come from. In my course unit on audiences and demographics, I make this point in relation to age range targeting, which often comes into play for B2B lead generation when guarding against clicks and inquiry conversions from job seekers as opposed to genuine prospects. A user from the 18 to 24 age range may be relatively likely both to click and to send a contact form tracked as a goal, but may also be disproportionately unlikely to be sending that form for reasons that are profitable for the advertiser. So potentially more likely to click and more likely to convert, but less likely to convert well. There's a newish feature called conversion value rules that begins to address this scenario. Conversion values can be weighted up or down based on which location, device type, or audience the converter belongs to. So when it comes to decisions around bidding and targeting, it's worth double-checking with yourself whether you're going after users who are just more likely to click, or users whose clicks are more likely to convert when compared with clicks from other users. Because when it's CPA or ROAS that you want, it's only the second of those considerations that matters. That's it from me for this time. If you like advanced paid search tips like this, then you'll like the free guide, 10 Advanced Tips for Paid Search. You can download it through the link below. This is Phil Taylor, PPC Strategist. Until next time.